This conference will now be recorded.
Casey, I have 7 o'clock and we have all the board here, so I'm going to start the meeting.
Very good. We're ready to go.
So good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending the West Goshen Township Board of Supervisors meeting of April the 20th, 2021. To start the meeting, will you please stand if you can and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic which it stands,
one
nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty
liberty and justice for all.
It's going to be so much better when we can do that in person. Thank you, everyone.
And quite frankly, that's the best special meeting for me and all of us, I think, today.
Thank you, John. Please be aware this meeting is being recorded using GoToMeeting, and so we can have a smoother teleconference as possible. Please mute yourself to eliminate distracting background noise. Each agenda item requiring a vote will proceed with a motion and a second by a board member, followed first by board member comments and questions, and then second by public comment and questions before a roll call vote is taken. When wishing to speak, please address myself as the meeting chair, requesting to comment and announce your name. And please note there is also an open public comment period at the end of the agenda. Okay, thank you. Let's see. The first agenda item tonight is discussion of various police and quality of life issues related to the Quality Inn at 943 South High Street. So this was something I requested to be on the agenda after actually myself had a call with some residents who live near the Quality Inn back in probably, I think it was mid-March. They expressed their concerns about the situation there with respect to the amount of crime. They expressed the fact that they felt unsafe in their own home relative to the crime spilling over into the neighborhood. They were very complimentary of the West Goshen Police Department and its responsiveness to their calls when they had issues. But they really were asking for the board to consider what could be done to address this situation more proactively than we have to date. So I wanted to have it on the agenda because I believe there are some things we can consider, perhaps that we need to discuss tonight. And I asked Casey to work with staff and the police chief to give it some forethought as well and see what options we might have. And that's kind of the background for why it's on the agenda. Perhaps a good way to start might be just to have a little bit of a recap. I know, Chief Carroll, you provided some insight to the situation when we were discussing conceptual development proposal for the property, but perhaps you could just give some thoughts as to what is the current status of the amount of attention that you need to provide to this property with respect to the crime issues.
Absolutely, thank you. So quickly, I can give numbers over the last several years. In 2019, our officers responded to 101 calls for service at the hotel, but separate from that, we performed 260 different checks in an effort to keep a little control over the incidents at the hotel. And then in 2020, we responded to 139 calls for service at the hotel, so almost 38 more, or exactly 38 more calls for service in the year. But we performed 357 checks during that same time period. So we increased our presence, but it didn't have an effect on the number of calls. In fact, the calls went up. And then in 2021, the first quarter of the year, we've responded to 53 calls for service, which is an increase in the rate of calls for service. And we've performed 71 checks, again, in an effort to keep things down. So we are performing extra patrols and property checks at the location to try and keep control, but we are continuing to get an uptick in calls at the hotel.
Are you able to report the amount of arrests or other salient data points that might help us understand the rate increase too?
The reasons for the calls run the gamut. There's a lot of disturbance calls that don't result in arrest. I know just from reading reports that their front desk people will call the police anytime there's an issue with someone staying at the hotel, and then our officers obviously respond and resolve the issue, and that is usually resolved without an arrest. There have been some incidents of drug violations where we have made arrests. A vast majority of the calls don't result in arrest, but they do result in attention from the police department.
So what I'd asked Casey and staff to consider really was kind of three factors. One was, is there something we can do with respect to our current ordinances in terms of this establishment and how it's being operated, in terms of are there violations or inspections that are required that would potentially help correct the situation. The second thing was to, is there something from a police attention perspective, a policing perspective that could help change the situation? And then the third thing is there something new that we could do with respect to an ordinance or a regulation that we could help change circumstances by enacting something new? And in particular, I had done a little bit of a research into this type of a problem, just Googling it, and there is a situation in Delaware County, I believe it's Springfield Township, which has a very similar problem of crime issues at a couple of hotels within their jurisdiction. And the news articles I read described an approach that they'd taken, trying to address some of the problems through a new regulation. Obviously, we want a successful business at this location. That's we want this Quality Inn to be a successful hotel. It's been there for a long, long time. It's been successful in the past, but the deterioration in recent years, certainly with respect to crime, says that it probably is a business that is not in good shape. I don't know, Casey, if you've anything to describe in terms of any contact with the business owner or any attempts you've made so far in terms of trying to address some of the problems that we've had. Is there anything there you can add to the background information?
Yeah, we've been talking as staff for a couple of weeks now, and with Chief Carroll. I have to defer to Kristen because there are things we could do, and I'd like Bill to jump in as well, just on inspections and just to ensure that they are maintaining the, health safety issues of the facility. But regulating it as a business, we didn't come up with any hard and fast conclusions because we wanted to have this public discussion with Kristen present as well. But we're open to anything that's legal and enforceable.
Yeah, Sean, I'm not aware of the Springfield Township ordinance you're talking about. I've never really, quite honestly, had any issues in any of the municipalities I represent on hotel uses. Obviously, property maintenance. I'm not sure that's going to get to the root of the problem. I know we had a conversation today on another hotel in the township. We were talking about building code, fire code issues, but I don't think that's really what's the problem at this particular hotel. Happy to look into the ordinances that you're referencing. And I think the second one, the police perspective, police options and things like that, it sounds like they're already doing that. It sounds like they're being proactive and doing some, higher number of checks and things like that. So again, happy to look into it. I'm not aware of any existing regulations that you don't already have in place that would really get to the root of the problem, or that new regulations, that would get to the root of the issues. I don't think your property maintenance code, your fire code, your building code are things that are really probably you would find. I think if you go into most older businesses and establishments, you'd probably be able to find some property maintenance code violations. But again, that's not really, I don't think citing the owner and having them fix things like that is really going to solve the issues that you're experiencing.
Yeah, so just a little bit more information. I'm looking at the articles I printed out now related to this specific situation in Springfield. They were really looking at having licenses and requirements for licenses for motels and being able to suspend licenses in the event of these, in the event that certain statistics that related to crime at the establishment were out of whack. So it's that kind of an approach. Now, it was obviously challenged by that particular business owner, and it was ultimately, there was a settlement agreement through the legal system to try to address the problem. So there was obviously some proactive approach with respect to the licensing approach that was used to try to leverage improvements at the property. So that's where I was coming from in terms of what we could do to maybe put something new in place.
I mean, I think what was brought to you before, and I know that it was not received favorably by the board, but as far as a zoning change, doesn't have to be what that particular developer was looking for, but if you want to encourage a different use there, I know you said that you would like to see a business owner do well, but if it's a struggling business operation and it's limited in what can happen in that location, maybe you think about, from a zoning perspective, what would be uses that the board could see working there and be compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods that would actually incentivize the owner to look for a buyer and come in with a new use. I know that's not an easy answer given its location and the access issues and things like that. It is sort of an interesting parcel the way it's zoned in terms of having industrial near it, office park, some residential, and then highway on the other side. So it's not an easy thing, but that is something that we could put some more effort and time into thinking about.
Yeah, that to me would be a fourth option. But at this point, let's hear from other board members. I don't know if we've got folks who live near the Quality Inn, if they want to share some of their experiences or thoughts as well around the specifics of issues that they see, and if they have any ideas as to what would be something that could hopefully change the circumstances. So first of all, is there any other board member that would like to comment on this or share their thoughts?
Well, let me just throw a question out there then. What is it about this location that seems to be a magnet for crime and for these kind of disruptive occurrences that seem to keep on happening? And it seems to be on the trajectory, it's getting even worse. Is there something about this location? Is there something about the history of it?
Low rates for the hotel, I mean, is what it comes down to, John. It's cheap rooms. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, this location, the historic hotel that was, I don't mean historic as a historic site, but historically, this was it was a mini conference center. I mean, we used to go to seminars there for DEP and the county all the time, and then it just started to slowly drift into this kind of flea bag motel place where lots of transient traffic and I mean, there used to be weddings there and scheduled parties, lots of traffic, and the use has just fallen apart over the past maybe 10 years.
So from what I'm hearing from you, then it's the management has a hand to play in this, and the way in which they develop certain policies, to develop a certain attractiveness to certain clientele, if you would. So possibly there's some movement that could be done with management, maybe not so much to hit them on fire code violations or property code violations, but to encourage them to change policies that would no longer attract a certain clientele.
Yeah, I mean, my thought on that, John, is it's kind of a downward spiral where an owner doesn't have the capital to invest to refurbish it and make it something that is attractive for business, and they therefore keep lowering the rates to fill it and get some income from it, but they're never capitalized enough to refurbish it to a standard that they can raise rates on and start making, more valid business out of it. So unfortunately, it could be that the owner is just not interested in investing in the property at this point and is hoping that, a zoning change will realize a property value increase for them that they can then sell at a profit and dump this business that they're not really making any money on anyway. I'm speculating, of course.
Understood. I guess my question was leading up to what is it that we as a township government entity are able to do to try to encourage a change in policy of management. The times I've gone over there, quite frankly, there wasn't hardly anybody or any cars in that parking lot. So they keep on dropping the rates, but I don't know how effective a strategy that is for them to bring in income. But regardless of that, what can we do as a township legally to encourage, if not require, property management to bring about policies that would change what we're experiencing over there?
I don't think you have a lot of power, to be quite honest. I mean, you can make strong encouragement of them and let them know that you're going to be having a watchful eye on all the various codes that you have, and that you're going to hold them to the letters of the law. But I mean, that could actually act as a disincentive, because it's making them spend more time and money on fixing, property maintenance or code violations. But as far as, I mean, I think it should become as a friendly touch, as a friendly encouragement of, hey, this is, it's not good for their business either that there's 139 calls in a year. That's not helping them market it. I mean, I think part of the problem is that with Airbnbs and other competition in and around the area and the growth of other hotels, conference centers, whatever, I think, like as Casey said, we used to have our bar association bench bars there every year, and it was a really lovely place, nice meals, all that. That was what, five years ago. So it hasn't been in the too distant past when it was still a viable business doing okay. But I don't think I never think it's a bad idea to open a dialogue with the owner and just get their point of view, understand what they're up against, understand why things have changed from their perspective, and then see what we can do to help them. Instead of doing it from an enforcement perspective, do it from a, what can we do to offer our services to help you make it succeed? Because in doing so, you're then helping you're helping both the township, decreasing the police costs, helping the residents to live nearby. So no doubt, I mean, I think it's got to be, as sort of Sean started, many pronged approach here, and I think dialogue with the owner is a great idea.
So I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts following what Kristen's saying. So I completely agree. I think that if we reach out to the owner and maybe take that first step of saying, we're getting these complaints, there's a lot of people that live around here that don't feel comfortable, whatever, kind of repeat what we've heard. My concern though is that after having spoken to the people that live on that street and next to it, it seems as though, one of the residents told us that she called the police like 3 times in 1 week or something. And I get the sense that because this business is really on the downturn and suffering, that all they're going to come back and say, and I don't know this, right? We do have to talk to them, but all they're going to come back and say is, I'm doing the best that I can. Obviously, if I could raise the rates, I would. And I'm almost, so with the Springfield case that Sean mentioned earlier that he had sent around to the board members, they actually, I believe, were taken to court. I mean, is that right, Sean? By the owner of the hotel.
Yeah, so, go ahead, Ashley.
Well, but that they were almost sort of like okay with doing that because they felt that their case was really justified in revoking their license because they were demanding such a huge amount of time from the police, and it was such a community problem and had persisted over so many years that they felt that the law would really be on their side. Now, I don't know if we have licenses that are given out to any of our businesses. Okay, so if we don't, then I don't know how that would work because we can't revoke something that's not there, and I don't know if we can instate something just because of a problem. I don't know how
you could. I mean, again, I want to research it more, but I'm sure there's some sort of local regulation, no different than how you require licenses for residential rental properties. You likely could have a rental license for hotel rooms. Again, I'm speaking off the cuff here, but I think that could occur. But again, that's a lot of administrative work. I'm not sure you have the administrative staff to do that, but that's probably what Springfield did. So
yeah, that's exactly what they did, Kristen. They had an ordinance that was related to hotel and motels, and their ordinances required issuance of licenses, inspection of facilities, and ability to suspend licenses in the event of circumstances like this occurring, unless a corrective, and it would need to be corrected to reinstate the license. So there seems to be an approach that would work in the event that, to Ashley's point, the owner is just not willing to address the problem of having spoken with them and asking them to, consider the issues that we have now with the safety of our residents and the crime that's occurring and the drain on our police resources as well. So it's probably a sequential approach, but I do think we need to look into, in the event that nothing changes through approaching the business owner, what is the most appropriate next step that we can do with respect to an ordinance that we can demand some standards for someone operating a hotel motel in West Goshen.
Sean, if I could bring something up, in Upper Marion, I think one thing that they do is that for their, I'll call them the low rent hotels, the hotel management provides a daily list of the occupants of the hotel to the police department. And I don't know if that could be seen as they use it as a deterrent to maybe curb drug sales and prostitution or whatnot at that hotel, at some of their hotels. And I don't know what the legal remedies there. I guess Kristen could answer that, if we could enact something like that, or if that's something that we have to work with our hotel partners in the township to agree to provide us a daily list of their occupants. Then you could, because what they do is it's not so much a daily list of occupants, but it's occupants that have a registered address in Pennsylvania.
So that might help. My only concern is that I'm not sure that the crime that's happening is being done by people that are actually paying for rooms. Like, it might just be happening on the property of the hotel. I don't know that for sure. I don't know if Chief Carroll, you can speak to that at all, or?
It's certainly not always. I can't come up with a number. The registered guest, it's oftentimes it's a guest of someone who rents the room, or they get someone to rent the room for the party. Someone obviously has to rent the room with a name, but they're not always the source of the problem.
Can I ask him, is this a part of a franchise? In other words, it's locally owned, but it's part of a corporate structure?
Yeah, it appears to be, it's a Quality Inn, but it appears to be a franchise, single location with one owner.
So I would suggest that we also approach in reaching out to the owner about our concerns, talk to corporate. They may actually have a hand to play in this, especially if their name is on the front of that hotel and it's getting this kind of reputation.
It's a good point.
Yeah, I agree, John.
Other thoughts from the board? Hugh, Robin? Robin, you're on mute.
I've been exposed
Sorry.
to that organization. Oh, I'm actually not on mute. Okay. When we had a business in West Goshen, I visited that location frequently to provide information about people if they were coming into town and they were staying in that hotel, that they had an urgent care that they could go to. But what I experienced when I was walking through the building, because I was not sure whether or not I wanted to actually commit to it, was that it still was very low volume, and we're talking about 2014 and 2015. At that point, I wasn't aware of any of the crime that was happening, but I felt that since that location had, by the time that I was going there to work with them, I believe that the multiple changes in ownership had diminished any quality that the people who worked there were able to provide. When I went there, there would be people who were probably 20 years old managing the desk. And it didn't seem to me to be at the level that I'm sure Quality Inn was expecting. So I do appreciate the idea, and I think it's important to talk first to the owner and perhaps maybe have a dialogue where you can suggest some ideas. I'm a little bit concerned about going to corporate, but I agree with John that they're losing money anyway because they have this issue, and they're creating a lot of frustration and concern in our community. And I think that's something that should rise to the level of the corporate entity.
Hugh, do you have any comments?
I do. First of all, Microtel had this same problem some years ago. I would ask Mike, Chief Carroll, to expound on does he still have the Microtel problem, or has it reduced? And if so, what did they do to knock it down?
It has reduced, but we did not do it. A fire did it. They had some damage. They closed the hotel for a while, so obviously that reduced the issues. They're starting to reopen. However, they're not fully opened. We are not experiencing the volume of calls we used to, but they're not fully opened yet, so I don't know what that's going to bring.
Chief, just on the fire there, was it caused by someone staying there, or was it some fault with the building in some way?
I don't recall the cause of it, and I think most of the damage was water damage from the sprinkler systems that ended up closing it, but I don't recall the cause of the fire.
Yeah.
It was an electrical fire.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
The damage was caused by the sprinkler system.
Is there any other board comments at this point? If not, I would like to hear if any of the residents who might be attending the meeting tonight would like to say a few words or not, if they would like.
Sean, this is Doug. Is the restaurant still operating on the premises, and is there a liquor license?
Derek or Casey, do you know the answer?
I do not. We have no records of their liquor license. There was an existing one there. I can check PLCB tomorrow and see.
Okay. Also, are there security cameras on the premises?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public who would like to comment?
Sure. My name is Amanda Hart. I would like to, I live right across from the Quality Inn and have a lot of crazy experiences. It's literally my front yard. Before I get into my experiences and kind of telling you guys a little bit about it, I did want to say that the licensing idea, it does concern me just a bit, because if they don't, let's say they, break code or whatever, and you guys revoke their license, I mean, what happens to the hotel? Does it just become an empty hotel that sits there and we could get squatters? And like, what would be worse? I mean, you kind of have a known evil, but a bunch of squatters might be even worse than that. So what would happen if you pull the licensing?
Well, Casey or Bill, you could probably comment on that. Amanda, my view would be that if the business could fail at any time and be shuttered, so right. that is a fact of life. If they were to try to make a go of it, get a license, and continue with the crime problem because of the wrong clientele, and their license was revoked, and they decided to no longer try to operate, then I would expect that we can enforce an appropriate closure of the building, and it would be shuttered, and it would not become a home for squatters. It's not something that would be that circumstance seems to me something we could address through the township. Would you agree, Casey, Bill?
Absolutely. Yeah, everything you said is very accurate. We would not allow the building to become a squatter's paradise by any means. It would be buttoned up, and any squatters would be removed if they broke in and arrested.
I would completely agree.
Okay. Well, my experiences with the Holiday Inn, it's happened over the last couple of years, but my house was, all the videos on the news from last year of the guy that holed himself up in there and had murdered his wife, and that whole story, all those videos were just my front yard. So I am directly right in front of it. I had cops posted up at my mailbox with guns and blocking off my street, which was probably the biggest thing that happened. But I mean, just on a daily basis, I've got people that stand right out in my driveway and stare into my house screaming to themselves. I've witnessed drug deals go down. I've heard women screaming over there, sounding like they're being beat. I mean, heard so much. Actually, for a while, I was even scared to go out to my car at night because I've heard a lot of assaults happening over there. So I just wanted to share some of my stories and hope that that puts some urgency behind it. There are a lot of people in my neighborhood that feel the way I do and that used to walk their dogs over there because it was such a beautiful area with the pool and the landscaping, that can no longer walk over there because there's drug paraphernalia and needles. So it's kind of all our neighborhood is just secluded away from this whole area, whereas it used to be high traffic in a good way. We used to see neighbors, and now everyone runs from our street.
Thank you, Amanda, for sharing your experience. Is there anyone else who would like to comment?
Sean, I just checked
Yeah.
the PLCB website, and they do have an active hotel liquor license.
Yeah, they do.
Thanks, Casey.
Can I offer, is there a security fence around the property?
No.
No.
Can that be required possibly?
So Hugh, to me, one of the things we would do is we would ask the staff to come up with a list that they feel would help improve matters there. So whether that would be a security fencing, some security cameras around the property, whatever else that we come up with that we could ask the owner to consider as steps that we feel would be headed in the right direction. Those are the kind of things that would be part of this initial dialogue with the current owner as to what he would be willing to consider and invest in to start to at least protect the neighborhood and also hopefully reduce the incidences of crime that we're seeing. But in and of itself, I'm not sure a fence around it, other than helping a little bit with the people wandering into the neighborhood, is going to reduce the fact that people are going to be still going there at the $40 an hour rate to do things we don't like.
And they walk into the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I see them down at night.
But it is all part of the initial conversation around what ideas the property owner would have to move in the right direction. So,
Sean,
can I make a comment?
Go ahead, Tina.
This is Tina.
Go ahead, Tina.
Yeah, John Hellman kind of took the words out of my mouth relative to corporate, but on that line also, what I'm thinking is the site potentially may be in violation of corporate policies that they could enforce on the building itself versus the township. I mean, I'm sure corporate has certain policies and procedures that a franchisee has to follow, including safety measures. And rather than the township getting involved in the enforcement, corporate can put the hammer on them.
Yeah, I think both approaches. I still think it's a good idea for the township to contact the corporate office and ask what their policies are and what they have with respect to inspection of their franchisees and whether they help them with investment or what. But I think we need to definitely raise the profile of this issue, not just with the property owner himself, and also with their corporate head office, and see if we get a response from either of them.
Maybe. Sean.
Yes,
Sean?
go ahead.
Barbara Cooper.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Yes, I am a longtime resident. I've lived out here since 1969. I raised my kids here. My grandkids were raised here. So and great granddaughter lives right up the top of the hill. This neighborhood means a lot to me. And for the Quality Inn to be the type of place it is when we have families with kids all up and down the street, when I take a walk during the day and you see them out there pushing their baby carriages and things like that, and then you see people walking down Stanton Avenue, which is the front way out of that, with ragged things and just not even you can tell they're not even part of the neighborhood. It scares me. My granddaughter lives at the top of the hill with her daughter and husband, and we had a fence put up around there so that and bought her a dog. Her dog weighs almost 200 pounds, just so that she would feel protected up there. I mean, some of the things that you see sitting on the corner up there out in her backyard, it makes me very uncomfortable, and I feel bad because this is my neighborhood. I go up and I talk to the neighbors, and it's just like anybody else, you know, over there, when they leave their job. We don't. We come home to our home. We come from our home to here and walk the streets and see all this going on. And there has to be something that we can do to make life what it was before. And I don't know the answer, but I'm sure that if we all got together, just like we're hearing this tonight, if we all got together and said, you know, what can we do to make things better, we could come up with a solution. I know we can. And I would just see it go back to the way it was, because I'll be living here forever. I've been here since 1969, and my husband moved out here in 1957. So, and Amanda, 2 doors up, and she lives right in front of it. And I've seen some of the things that she's seen up there.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Barbara. We appreciate you sharing your experience. It's clearly an issue as far as I'm concerned. And I think it warrants action here by the township and with the support of the board. So, you know, just going back to a multi-pronged approach, what I heard from this conversation was that we certainly would like to reach out to the current franchise owner, have a conversation with him about the state of affairs, ask him what he believes he could do to start remedying the situation. And in parallel with that, also reach out to the quality and corporate office and explain our concerns about the deterioration of this property and how it's being managed. So that was one. The second thing was review where we are with our own current ordinances in terms of inspections for violations, etc., that can at least prompt potentially again improving the matters with respect to the asset itself. The third thing was to ask our solicitor to look into our ability to institute an ordinance for hotels and motels in West Goshen with respect to a licensing requirement and what standards we could have as part of that and what we could do in terms of suspending licenses in the event that there still remain problems. And then there was a fourth suggestion as well, which was, well, if it fails to be a valid business, or if we want to try to consider changing what the property is used for, we could consider what zoning changes we could make that would incentivize a sale to some future development. So those were the four things that I think make sense. Does the board agree with what I've just said and would support the township working on this?
Yeah, it sounds good. You want to put a timeline on this? What are we looking for? I guess the first thing is about the staff coming up with a list of corrective actions and then setting up a meeting. Would that be the first step in this process?
I think so. I think the first step is to, you know, what are the specific issues we want to raise with the property owner and provide something proactively to him, like you said, a list, John, in terms of things that we think could, you know, start to improve matters, and be open, of course, to whatever else he would suggest as solutions that he could offer to get back to where it used to be. So that would be the first step. But I would think in parallel with that, to Ashley's point earlier, you know, if his response is going to be, I don't have the money to invest, I'm sorry, but this, you know, I'm not in violation of your ordinances and codes today, that we should also in parallel be asking Kristen to look at what type of ordinance we would need to have a licensing requirement for these type of establishments.
That would be like a hammer. Okay, that makes sense.
Who's going to reach out to the owner? Sean, is that something that like you would do with Casey, or something that Casey and Bill would do, or who's going to be talking?
Well, I would volunteer for Casey, Bill, and myself to have those couple of conversations. Actually, if you know, I'm happy if someone else wants to be involved as well. But I do think it needs not just township staff, but also one or two of the board to also express their concerns and hopefully help move the process along.
Yeah, I mean, I would volunteer to do that with you if you need another board member. Otherwise, I completely think that the three of you would be able to handle it. But since I've been involved, I would like to sort of see it through. So.
Okay, great. So I just need the board to approve the fact that we're asking Kristen to do work here, which obviously incurs a cost, looking at something new. Do you want to do that now, or do you want to wait and see where we get to with conversations with the owner and the corporate office?
Can I just interrupt and ask a question, or actually share a point of view? I don't know how Amanda and Barbara would feel about it, but I think it would be very valuable for the residents who've already shared stories with us to provide that maybe to the three of you before you go to that meeting, to kind of make sure that he understands the impact that it's having on those residents who've lived there since 1969 plus.
Well, why not have them involved in the actual meeting as well?
I think the first step should be the township having that engagement, because it's our responsibility. But I think down the road, if we need to have some backup, especially when you're going to the corporate office to see what these residents are dealing with, I think that would get a lot more of their attention, and that would give them an opportunity for them to say their piece.
Yeah, it's a good idea, Robin. I do think perhaps initially we do the reach out, and I mean, we've got the information from the chief. You know, their own front desk or people staying there have made over 200 and close to 300 calls here for service from the police. If the property owner isn't aware of that, he certainly should be. So we've got information here relative to the amount of activities that require police attention. If he feels he needs more proof that the residents are being negatively affected, then fine, we'll ask for more support. But let's see where we get to with just the township and the board reaching out.
Sean.
Go ahead, Hugh.
If possible, I'd like to help with that, since I've lived in the township since '58, and on my honeymoon stopped at the orchards, so I'm familiar with the property all the way through, from when Frank John owned it to the current one.
Yes.
If I could, I'd like to help you with that.
That'll be great, Hugh. We'll get something set up, and we'll bring you into the loop, and you can hopefully participate with us.
Thank you, sir.
We may divide and conquer it. You know, maybe one or two of us will talk to the franchisee, and one or two different people could talk to the corporate office, and you know, have a multi-pronged approach. Can I just go back to my question relative to whether we want our solicitor to start working on anything at this point, or whether you want to wait until we get a response from these initial reach outs?
I guess my question for that would be, how long would it take for Kristen to look into this, and like, what's the timeline of that?
I don't think it would take that long, Ashley. I think it would be a couple hours, and I think I could have something to report back to you for your work session.
Oh, okay. I guess in that case, I would say we could wait on that until we talk to the property owner.
Okay. So, Kristen, you just need to, unless any of the other board feel differently at this point, Kristen, just be on standby for this, and we'll see where we get to with these conversations. And if we're not getting a good feeling that anything's going to change, we'll come back to you. Is there anything from a policing perspective, Chief Carroll, that you feel we could do a little differently, or think about at least as to a way to continue to
get to Draco.
try to make influence a change of approach by the current owner?
I think we can certainly increase our presence. It's pretty substantial now. We can increase it, see what effect they may or may not have. But obviously, every minute we spend down there, we're not spending in other neighborhoods.
Right. Yeah.
Do you feel it's to the detriment right now, the amount of attention you're having to put on it relative to the rest of West Goshen?
No, I think there's a value for it, but at some point we're going to get a diminishing return when we're down there so much and not having an effect. Okay. But I think we can increase it and see if it has an effect.
Okay.
Thank you. Any final comments? Go ahead, Hugh.
Yeah, there is. I was going to say, since we're so close to the West Town line, is there any possibility of getting some cooperation from West Town to show the presence there in the area?
You're talking policing presence, Hugh, or just the West Town board and the township support from them?
Well, could be both, but I specifically was referring to the policing.
I can check with Chief Bernat to see what kind of call volume they get on Stanton Avenue in the area. I'm not familiar with their call volume there, but I will certainly bring it up with her.
Okay, good.
Check with DML. They get cars broken into every day.
Okay, so just to wrap this up, is there any final comment or questions from either the board or a member of the public that we haven't already covered?
Sean, this is Doug. How would the board feel if a developer wanted to come along and redevelop it into a hotel that was more upscale?
Well, I think we would certainly entertain it. I mean, the idea here is that, you know, it's a grandfathered use, is my understanding, for where it is. And if someone wants to come and invest appropriate money and make it an upscale hotel that sells Levante beer, I'll probably be down there myself.
Yeah. Well, it's a possibility. Just okay. Thank you.
All right, thanks. All right, well, thank you everyone for the conversation on that. I felt it was productive, and hopefully the residents feel that you have got the attention of the board and staff here, and we'll see what we can do.
Sean?
Barbara had a comment.
Go ahead.
One final comment. I want to thank everybody. I know that I'm sitting here looking at all the faces, and there was quite a bit of interest, and the questions were very good. And I just appreciate your concern of the people that live in your township. And thank you.
Well, thank you, Barbara.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Barbara.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So next on our agenda was a change in order, I believe. We're going to move to, just trying to find my agenda here. We're going to move to what originally had been item number 11, which is discussion of the draft solar ordinance and other ordinance and saldo chain amendments. So I see Henry and Tina on the attending the meeting, and I know you guys have done some work on the at least the solar ordinance. So do you want to just kick this off?
Certainly. I put together some comments as to what the solar ordinance is, and I can read them off. And Tina, if you have anything, be happy to hear that also.
Sure.
So Henry, you're just going to headline the comments that you have, right, on what's changing, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to say the Sustainability Advisory Committee voted at their November 2020 meeting to review the solar energy systems ordinance and asked Tina Marie and myself to assemble a committee to consider and prepare revisions to it. The committee was formed, which consisted of Tina, Derek Davis, Rick Craig, Bill Webb, Ashley Gagne, Doug Stewart, Corey Wegberger, and myself. The group also consulted with Kristen Camp for the legal interpretations. The reasons for the SAC recommended a review of the solar energy systems ordinance was to clarify the rules for allowing solar energy systems to update the ordinance to account for changes in the solar technology and legislation, and to allow increased installation of solar energy systems consistent with good zoning practices and sensitive to the aesthetic requirements of the township. The following general types of amendments to the solar energy systems ordinance were recommended. It allows roof-mounted solar energy systems as an accessory use by right in all zoning districts. It continues the allowance of ground-mounted systems as an accessory use by right for properties with single-family dwellings subject to compliance with the related sections of the regulations as before. It allows ground-mounted systems in all zoning districts as an accessory use by special exception, subject to the compliance with related sections of the regulations as before. It maintains a limited size a limit on the size of solar energy systems in residential areas to 125% of the estimated energy needed for principal use of the property, if any part of the system is a ground-mounted system. For the purposes of this restriction, is to prevent the overbuilding of ground-mounted systems on residential neighborhoods for commercial purposes. This limitation does not apply to systems which are entirely roof-mounted because the size of the roof-mounted system in residential areas will be limited by the size of the roof itself. The 125% restriction is eliminated on solar energy systems that are accessory uses in all other zoning districts. There are more than 4 million square feet of flat roof on large and medium-sized buildings in the township that, under the right conditions, could receive solar arrays and generate electricity for the community. This capacity is in addition to the residential roofs in the township. And finally, the revised ordinance would adjust some of the area and bulk requirement in the various zoning districts, but would not significantly alter them. In conclusion, the group revising the solar energy system ordinance thinks that the revisions to the ordinance will allow the installation of additional solar arrays in the township while maintaining the aesthetic sensibilities and the safety of the residents and businesses of the township. We appreciate the assistance of the township staff and the members from the planning board in examining the issues that arose in this review, and we look forward to your comments and the comments of the public regarding the proposed changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Tina, did you want to add anything to Henry's comments?
No, I think he summarized it very well. I just want to say thank you to everybody that helped participate on the committee. There was some very good dialogue and good suggestions, and hopefully it encourages more people to use this.
Okay, thanks, Tina. Did the board have any comments or questions on the proposed revisions to the township solar ordinance?
No, I think that the committee did a really good job. And I think it looks good, and I'm comfortable moving forward. So thank you, Henry, for summarizing that.
Thank you.
I like my ditto there too. Good job.
Robin or Hugh, you good?
Yes, I'm good. I like this was very well prepared so that we could read it carefully and be prepared in understanding it.
Anyone from the township staff, Derek, Rick, or Casey, do you have any comments? I mean, obviously, it sounds like this was a good process that was used.
You know, I have no further comments. Henry summed it up well. I thought the process was well done, and I think we found a pretty good balance to having very reasonable and acceptable changes to enhance the use in the township. So overall, I think it was definitely a good job done by the committee.
Yeah, it was definitely a good collaboration. My only question for the board is, do you want to get us to get this ready for advertisement?
Casey, does this have to go through the planning commission before we?
And county planning commission.
Yeah, so we need a minimum 30 days.
Okay, so let's just hear from the public first, and then we'll ask the board to hopefully endorse that approach. So are there any questions or comments from the public attending relative to these proposed changes to the township solar ordinance?
Sean, this is Doug. I have a question, please. Did the committee working on this think about the situation where if someone wants to install solar panels on the ground, but then would have to remove mature trees to do that, would that situation be covered in this ordinance or handled in a certain way?
No, that was not considered.
That would not be part of this ordinance. That would be part of our existing tree ordinance and would be covered under Chapter 69.
So Rick, what would the process be? Would a homeowner be able to fell mature trees to put in a ground-mounted array, or would it be in conflict with our existing tree ordinance?
Currently, a resident on a residential property would be able to remove up to 4 trees per acre without a permit. Since most properties are less than an acre, that would mean that in most cases they could only remove 1 or 2 trees without getting a permit. They could then apply for a permit if they wish to remove more, but then they would also be required to do a 50% replacement of anything removed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Sean, also the number of 125% electric generation on site to be the maximum. How was that number arrived at? Does that have to do with a safety aspect or a regulation with PECO in terms of being able to sell the excess power back to PECO, or could a homeowner actually go ahead and generate more power than they need and sell it back, or even sell it to their neighbors?
I believe the PUC limits it at 110%, but I would have to go back and recheck that for selling back at the price that they pay for. Now, the 125% was the original number put in there into the original ordinance about 10 years ago.
Okay, and just one more question, please. When the solar panels are depleted and need to be replaced, is there a provision on proper disposal of the solar panels?
There's a provision for the removal of solar panels which are no longer in use, but there's no requirement, as I understand, for their recycling of the materials in the solar panels.
Okay, thank you.
Henry or Tina, do you know if there's any current state or federal regulation relative to disposal of solar panels by the owner of those panels at the end of their useful life?
I know of none.
I know of none either. The only thing they got into was when you're no longer using it and you're abandoning the property or closure of it is what they get into. And there's ordinance and regulations and requirements relative to that, but not for disposal.
So in this situation, if the solar array was abandoned, the cost of removal and disposal is still on the property owner, correct? In this
Correct.
ordinance?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
And you put the property back to like, what it was.
Yeah.
Sean, excuse me, I have one more question, please. This is Doug. For ground-mounted arrays, can those panels get really hot, and should they be cordoned off from passersby or kids playing around them?
There's a requirement that there be a fence around the ground-mounted arrays in the electrical codes.
Okay, so they'll be cordoned off. Okay, thank you.
And there's certain requirements for the distance too, and how large the fence has to be.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, if I could ask, Henry, how were you able to review other township and municipality ordinances regarding solar arrays and solar panels, and how does these revisions here compare?
On the ground?
I've looked at the solar ordinances of Eastern Chester County for about 10 or 15 of the ordinances, and they all seem to be produced without looking at anybody else's ordinances. They're all different, and each one, as far as we can see, needs to be changed to allow more use of solar arrays in a way that is aesthetically acceptable to the residents.
I mean, I can answer on that. I think it depends upon the municipality's policy objective. And if the policy objective, for example, in Birmingham, was to not necessarily encourage it because it was not compatible from a historical aspect, and there's a lot of historically protected properties there, they didn't want to encourage it. So if the policy of this board is that you do want to encourage it, then the changes that the SAC has recommended are appropriate and should go forward. But I think that, looking at other ordinances, again, you can look at it for ideas, but you have to understand what the objective of the governing body was when they were enacting the ordinances. Because some of them were not to encourage them, and some of them were put in place years ago when it was sort of a new industry and there was concerns and fears from an aesthetic standpoint. So I think this is one of the more recent, I think that you guys are on the leading edge of looking at it for purposes of encouraging the technology.
Okay.
Other questions from the board or the public?
Has there been any consideration to adding controls for wind power?
That was not considered in this issue. Wind power is not something that is really employed that much in this area, more up on the ridges of the Appalachians. But it could be considered in the future.
Yeah, Hugh, we are not in a traditional wind zone here, so people don't look for wind turbines in this area.
Are there any final questions or comments from anyone attending the meeting? Hearing none. Casey, so you had asked if the board wanted to move this forward through the Planning Commission, Chester County Planning, and advertise for adoption, correct?
Correct.
So is anyone on the board willing to make that motion tonight?
I'll make
the
it.
motion.
Okay, John's got it.
Is there a
I'll second.
second?
I'm sorry, who was the second? Hugh?
Yeah.
It goes,
Take your pick, Casey.
Take your pick.
You got it. Ashley first, Hugh second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any final board questions or comments? Are there any public questions or comments?
I'm just going to add that this will, because of the 30-day requirement, you're not going to meet your May meeting, so you're looking at a June timeframe.
Right.
Okay.
Kristen, how does this fit in with the other proposed changes for ordinances that we try to group together? Is this going to be compatible with getting it done with some of those as well?
Yeah, the next two on your agenda, which was the sort of miscellaneous zoning amendment, that's coming back to you after the Planning Commission looked at it, as well as the saldo edits. So we could incorporate all of that into sort of one master advertisement and hearing in June.
Right.
Okay, sounds good. All right, well, at this point,
It's Margie. Can I have a quick question, please?
go ahead, Margie.
Hi, just wondering, procedurally, why didn't this go to the Planning Commission first?
We had asked the SAC to look into it, I believe, through Ashley as our board liaison, and we wanted to see what kind of changes were being proposed. So it was really more.
It did not go to the full Planning Commission first, if that's the impression Margie was under. There was a couple members that was part of the ad hoc committee that were Planning Commission members in order to add the perspective that they had as Planning Commission members. But it has not been seen yet by Planning Commission as of yet.
Yeah, I just thought these things needed to go through Planning Commission first. That way it would also be covered by the county. So I was just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, just to reiterate, Margie, the idea here was that we had asked the SAC and the Planning Commission to work on this together, produce something that we wanted conceptually to be what the board is, like Kristen's point, is headed in the direction of encouragement. So that's what we were doing tonight. And now we just have agreed to move it through those next formal steps.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're ready for a roll call vote then. So we have a motion second. So Ashley.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Hugh.
Aye.
Robin.
aye.
Sean is aye. So Kristen, we should probably finish up this agenda item now and just talk about the other proposed changes that aren't ready for approval tonight?
Sure. So I attended the planning commission meeting last week. After your last board meeting, we had conversations about these two ordinances. The first one I'll call the miscellaneous zoning amendment, which dealt with definition of a through lot, projections into required yards, which Bill and I took a little bit more time and looked at the R3A, the R3B, and the R3C district to make sure that they were also appropriately regulated. We didn't make any changes to the exceptions on height limit. Storage sheds, there was a comment at the planning commission meeting about making sure, again, we looked at R3A, R3C, and R3B. So we've addressed those within that provision. Those were the only other changes. So I think we've got it all now. Those were new residential districts that for the R3B, which is the woodlands at Greystone, that within its own area and bulk requirements addresses projections into the yards and also addresses storage sheds. So we don't have to specifically regulate that, but we do make reference to the section that's in chapter 84-14.6 that governs those two things. But we did bring in the R3C district, which again, quite honestly, I just had forgotten about that district having been created. So I think this addresses, the planning commission supported this. I think it covers the things that Bill was concerned about. And I would ask that this version go to the Chester County Planning Commission for its review.
Are there any board comments or questions on the updated revisions? Are there any public comments or questions on these updates?
Sean, this is Doug White. I just had a concern with the exemptions from the height limits. Not that there should be a limit on the religious aspects, but I still think that if a structure wants to go above the height limit, it should still come before the board on a case-by-case basis and be approved, even if it's for religious reasons, or even if it could be, say, like a ham radio antenna tower or something like that. And I know Henry was talking about having solar panels being aesthetic. I think that could be a concern here too. We don't want some 80-foot tower or something being constructed for religious reasons, but I don't know, maybe it's allowed, but I just thought the board should have some sort of say in that. That's all.
This exception only applies to structures that have a religious purpose. So it wouldn't work to a radio tower or a ham radio tower. It's specific to our concern about RLUIPA, which is a federal regulation. Again, as we mentioned at the planning commission meeting, the applicant would have to demonstrate that the reason why they're going to a height that exceeds our height limitation is because the structure that's being proposed has some meaning or significance within the exercise of the religion. So it's not just a carte blanche, stamp it, and just because they want it, they get it. There would be some analysis done. There would be discussion and analysis of the federal law to see whether or not the township had any ability to try to prevent it. So,
okay, so even as worded, the board would still have input and it would still need some sort of approval. Is what you're saying?
I don't think it's the board necessarily. I think it's a zoning officer duty as they evaluate the plan. I don't think it necessarily comes to the board. I mean, if it's a land development application that's proposed, then yes, that would be one aspect that would ultimately get board approval.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions from the public? Okay, can I have a motion to move this to the Chester County Planning Commission?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
I'll second.
Okay, is there any final board comments or public comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, ready to take a roll call vote. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Hugh?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Sean? Aye. Okay, was there another one here? Kristen,
Yeah,
to go over?
there were some amendments to the subdivision land development ordinance, and last meeting, there was a comment, we had talked about revising a section that dealt with access for residential developments. And there was a comment made that we had eliminated, originally it was written that said, all lots shall have direct access on a public street. And Ms. Ford had recommended and questioned why we didn't add private street, so we did add that language. That was made. So we accounted for that particular provision. And this also was recommended by your planning commission to move it forward to the county planning.
Are there any questions from the board related to the changes that are now in front of us?
I'll make a motion to approve this.
Thanks, John. Is there a second?
We're just sending it to the county planning. We're not approving the ordinance.
Yeah, right.
Okay, just want to make sure.
A second.
Thanks, Ashley. Any final board questions or comments? Is there any comments or questions from the public? Okay, ready for a roll call vote. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Hugh?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Sean is aye. Very good. So going back to our agenda, that was item number 11 that we've just covered. So we're going to go back to item number 5, which is discussion and possible approval of ordinance number 1, 2021, cable television franchise agreement with Verizon.
So just so I'll preface it by saying that at your March meeting, my colleague Tom Esty was here for you. We did advertise this ordinance for a hearing on March 16th. It was advertised on March 1st in the Daily Local. We also sent a copy of the ordinance and the proposed renewal agreement to the Daily Local and Law Library for public inspections. You had opened the hearing and had conversation about it and decided not to move forward on adopting the ordinance. You had some questions, so the hearing was continued until tonight. Dan Cohen, who was the lawyer in charge of working on behalf of many municipalities in Chester County, negotiating with Verizon, is prepared and ready to speak to you. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Kristen. How are you this evening?
Good, thanks.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. As Kristen said, my name is Dan Cohen. I'm with the Cohen Law Group, and our law firm represented the Chester County Consortium, which actually your manager, Casey Lalonde, was one of the key coordinators putting together that consortium in negotiating cable franchise renewal with Verizon Pennsylvania. I leave it up to the board as to whether you would like me to make a brief presentation about the agreement, or if we should just answer questions, because I know that this was up, as your solicitor said, this was up on the board agenda last month, and I know that there were questions about complementary services. So however you'd like to proceed, Mr. Chair, I could do a brief overview of the agreement, or could address simply the complementary services issue, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Cohen. I think you did a really good job with the summary note that you provided to the township on March the 15th that highlighted the key changes in this negotiated agreement. So I appreciate that. It was very clear, and I think the board was able to understand what this new agreement looks like. Perhaps tonight, if you could really just verbally describe the information with respect to the complementary services and the note that you provided to the board with respect to that. That really would just be, that was one of the outstanding items from our previous discussion.
Sure, no problem. And as you just mentioned, Casey asked that we prepare a short memo on this issue, which I did, and it has the date of April 17th on it. So if you need if there's any further information that you need, it may well be there. But also please feel free to ask any questions at all. So on the issue of cable company contributions to local governments, over and above the franchise fee, which of course is a percentage of cable operator gross revenues. Up until August of 2019, that was very common. And that would include things like complimentary cable services to municipal buildings, schools, and public libraries. It would also include other things like financial support for public education governmental channels called PEG channels. I know that West Goshen does not have one of those, but that would be a common one. Or institutional networks, which is usually done for larger municipalities. In August of 2019, the FCC came out with its third report and order on video franchising, and they came up with a new concept called in-kind cable contributions, and complementary services falls within that category. And what the FCC said was that all in-kind contributions for municipalities that charge a franchise fee of the maximum, which is 5%, and the vast majority of municipalities do, the market value of those in-kind contributions can be offset against franchise fees. In other words, can reduce your franchise fees accordingly. That decision, it's a 99-page order, but that order is on appeal now in the federal court system. It's before the Sixth Circuit Court. Our law firm is actually involved in that appeal. We're representing the city of Pittsburgh in that appeal. To challenge that order because, at least in my judgment, it's not legally sustainable. The Sixth Circuit Court held the oral argument on this case last week. You know, it's very difficult to tell from an oral argument how it will go, so I'm not going to even take a guess at that. But the Sixth Circuit will be deciding that case at some point to see whether that FCC order is upheld or not. Until that time, cable operators will not give cable services to municipal buildings or schools or libraries for free. The FCC order actually says that they're not even allowed to. So the way that we negotiated that portion of the agreement with Verizon is that we include an Exhibit A to the agreement, and we've added the 6 schools that the board has asked for to that Exhibit A. And if the FCC order is overturned on final appeal, which potentially that could go to the Supreme Court, then those facilities will get cable services on a complimentary basis for free. If not, then they won't. So that's really the way that the franchise agreement has been crafted. That portion of the franchise agreement has been crafted. We'll absolutely keep you advised as to what happens with that FCC order, and would be happy to entertain any questions or comments.
Thanks, thanks, Dan. Any questions or comments from the board relative to that explanation of the outstanding action that we had from our last discussion on this?
I would just like to thank him for preparing a memo that was very easy to read and understand based upon the conversations we were having in the most recent, I guess it was in March. It was very much easier for me to understand pretty much everything that you shared with us today, and makes a lot of sense. So thank you.
Thank you.
The only other item that we had that was a question from our discussion in March was really from John, and that was relative to the income that we receive from these cable fees. And obviously we have Verizon and Comcast, and I think Christine had provided a breakout of that information and shared it with the board a couple of weeks ago. So John, did that satisfy your question?
Well, yeah, that was my concern, was what kind of trend are we seeing in these fees? So that was my interest.
Okay. So I think we've covered the discussion on this tonight. So at this point, do we have a motion for approval of adoption of ordinance number
I'll make that motion.
2021?
It's number 1. Mm-hmm.
Number 1, okay. Hugh has made a motion. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, is there any final board questions or comments for Dan or Kristen at this point? Are there any public comments or questions? Hearing none, we're ready for a roll call vote. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
You?
Aye.
Robin? Robin, are you on mute?
Yes, I am. Aye.
Thank you. Sean is aye. Thank you very much, Dan. We appreciate your time tonight and the excellent memos that helped us get a good understanding of this agreement.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 7, discussion and possible approval of ordinance number 2, 2021 revised alarm and false fire alarm ordinance.
All of these ordinances that are the next 4 items on your agenda, I'll just say this once for the record, and I did provide these, or if I didn't, I will, for the township files. We advertised in one summary ad all 4 of these ordinances because they only required a 7-day ad, meaning that any code section that's not zoning or subdivision land development only requires one advertisement at least 7 days prior to the public hearing. So all of these were advertised in the Daily Local News on April 10th, 2021. Because we did not advertise the entire text of the ordinance, we also have to provide a copy of the ordinance for public inspection to the Chester County Law Library and to the Daily Local News, which we did on April 9th of 2021. So that applies to all 4 of the ordinances you're going to consider. We talked about this ordinance at your work session. This came about as a result of, actually, I think you authorized this in February as a result of an uptick or just recognition of the fact that there are false fire alarms and that the fire departments in the township are incurring expenses to respond to those false fire alarms. You already have in your code a chapter 25 that deals with burglar alarms and the police responding to those false burglar alarms. So what we did was we amended one section of your existing code, 25-19A1, to instead of putting the fines for the false burglar alarms, we're now going to reference a fee resolution. And then we added a new chapter 25A to deal with false fire alarms. We've added some definitions. After your last work session, we did, Bill, myself, Andrea Testa, and Mike had a conversation, I think it was the day after, and they provided us some comments on the ordinance. And the way it's going to work now is that the chief of the fire department shall provide to the township on a monthly basis a list of the false fire alarms that the fire department responds to in the prior month. The township shall then send written notification of the false fire alarm and an invoice for the applicable fee as established by the fee schedule to the owner. The owner then will hopefully pay the fee as sent on the written notice. And if they don't, then the township can exercise the violation and penalty section that's set forth in the ordinance. So there have been, like I said, there have been changes from the last review of this because that was based on Andrea Testa and Mike, is it McCarthy, am I saying his name right? His comments.
Thank you, Kristen. Are there any board questions about the changes that have been made?
No, I'm comfortable with it.
Can we have a motion then for approval to adopt this change?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Are there any board comments or questions after the motion's been made?
Can we review the schedule of fees that are being considered at this point, along with this ordinance change?
Yes, the first you had mentioned, and this was adopted in February, and it will be added to a new fee resolution to be adopted. The first alarm per calendar year, you will receive a warning. The second and third alarm per calendar year, you will be assessed a fine of $50. The fourth through seventh per calendar year, $250. And the eighth and subsequent alarms per calendar year, $500.
So just to review, the first is a warning, the second is $50. What is the third? The third is for $250?
No, second and third are both 50.
Okay.
Fourth through seventh, $250, and eighth and above, $500.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board? We have a motion and a second. Any other questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public? Hearing none, we're ready for roll call vote. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
You?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Sean? Aye. Thank you.
Next agenda item is an ordinance to amend the fine section of Chapter 75. Chapter 75 regulates your rental property. Bill had suggested that the violation and penalty section be revised to lower the minimum fine from $300 to $100. So the scope of this amendment is very narrow. It amends section 75-10 to change the minimum fine to $100, the maximum fine to $1,000 if there's any provision of the rental regulations in Chapter 75 that are violated.
Thanks, Kristen. Do I have a motion for approval to adopt this change?
I'll make the motion.
Thanks. Is there a second?
I'll make the second.
Are there any final board comments or questions on this change? Are there any public questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Yes.
Hugh?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Sean is aye. Thanks, Kristen. Next one.
Sure. The next one is an amendment to Chapter 70, which regulates, this Chapter 70 is called Streets and Sidewalks, but this particular section, 70-9, deals with snow and ice removal. The changes to the existing section of 70-9 would require the owner, occupant, or tenant of the property that abuts a sidewalk to remove snow or ice for a minimum width of 3 feet. Currently, it's 2 feet for the entire length of the abutting sidewalk. And it also used to say within 48 hours, and now this says within 24 hours. The other section that's been added is prohibiting people to push, dump, or deposit snow or ice which is accumulated on the sidewalk or on private property into a public street, public park, or public property. So basically, it came about as a result of concerns about people shoveling snow from their private property into the public right-of-way, which then causes issues with the snow clearing process.
Thank you, Kristen. Do we have a motion to approve adoption of this change to ordinance chapter for 2021, chapter 70?
Yeah, I'll make the motion.
I just have one quick question, just to clarify, because I'm not remembering from our last meeting. Do other municipalities around us have similar ordinances in place?
Yes.
Okay.
Just about everyone.
Okay.
Is there a second to Robin's motion?
I'll make the second.
Thanks, Hugh. Just one question from me, Casey, relative to the section 70-9B. Just remind me again what the proposed approach is to deal with the commercial properties that are plowing into the roadways. Was it to deal directly with the snow removal operator, or is it to deal with the property owner in terms of what's happening?
Well, obviously, if we can catch them in the act, we will intercede with the landscaping company, et cetera, whatever, and have them remove the snow immediately, which would not result in a fine, obviously. We will also make contact with the property owner because as the The person paying the bill for that landscaper, they're ultimately responsible, but we would focus on the landscaping company.
And is that really where the attention of enforcement will be for this? Or are you considering residential property owners, with snow on their driveway, shoveling it into the street as someone that you would want to enforce against too?
Well, I mean, anytime, they're residents who are shoveling it back into the street or not clearing their ramps, they're putting the public in danger by not doing that. So we're only looking for, encouraging compliance. We've never, I don't think Bill's ever written a citation for this. We're just looking for, encouraging people to clear their sidewalks and driveways correctly. That's all.
Bill, have you ever issued a citation for someone not clearing snow off a sidewalk within 48 hours?
No. Generally, after the people get a warning and we're told that if they don't do it, then we could fine them up to $1,000, which is what was in the ordinance, then they quickly are out there with a shovel.
But that would be maybe 3 days after a snow event that you're having that conversation, correct?
No, I get those phone calls within 24 hours after the snow event's over.
So you're already asking someone to remove snow prior to the 48 hours that's in our current ordinance, correct?
We are already receiving phone calls.
Okay.
Yeah, it's typically neighbors contacting us about their neighbors. That's typically what it is.
Yeah, a lot of times it's parents calling because their kids have to walk off of the sidewalk and into the street to get to the school bus.
Right.
Okay. Do any of the other board members have questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment or questions? Hearing none, we're ready for a roll call vote. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Hugh? Robin?
Aye.
Sean is aye.
The last one is amending Chapter 7, which deals with your township manager, specifically Section 7-6B, identifies the manager's responsibilities. And this amendment would have the police chief report directly to the Board of Supervisors rather than to the manager.
Thank you, Kristen. Do I have a motion from the board for this straightforward change for approval and adoption of ordinance number 5, 2021?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Are there any board questions or comments?
Well, I'll just make a comment. As part of the search we just conducted over several months to find our current police chief, Carol, this was part of our discussion from early on, even just developing the job description for the replacement for Chief Gleason. We wanted to be clear that the chain of command would be the police chief would be reporting to the Board of Supervisors, and that was actually included in the original job description that was posted nationwide. So we've had a lot of discussion about this, and a lot of thinking about it, a lot of deliberation, and now we're doing the final event of what we have to do as far as making this township policy and as part of our township code.
Thanks, John. Are there any other board comments or questions? Are there any public comments or questions?
Hi, it's Margie.
Go ahead, Margie.
Could you just clarify the financial oversight, just to explain kind of the separate police budget, if you will? And will Chief Carroll be ultimately responsible for the financial oversight, or does that ultimately fall on the township manager? I was a little unclear when I read the ordinance.
So my view is that this is about the reporting relationship, and the chief has in his performance assessment that we've agreed with the chief language around performance against financial budget that was submitted by the police department that the budget that is submitted is reviewed by the township manager and the board, and ultimately the board has a say in the police budget that ultimately would be adopted. So I personally, from my perspective, I believe the board has the responsibility to understand the police budget and adopt an appropriate budget for the police department.
And that's true, with the caveat that it's the responsibility of the police chief for the administration of that budget.
Correct. Does that answer your question, Margie?
Yeah, I think so. And then I did send the board a copy of the East Goshen Township Manager Ordinance compared to West Goshen's. And I hope the board is going to move forward and consider some of those changes if they see fit. And maybe we could have that discussion at another meeting.
Yes, thank you for sending that, Margie. The board did receive it, and we are having an ongoing conversation around the whole aspect of township manager in terms of performance review, etc. So that will be something we will take into consideration.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there any other public comments or questions? Hearing none, ready for a roll call vote. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Yes.
Hugh?
No.
Robin?
Aye.
Sean is aye. Thank you, Kristen, for walking us through all those changes for our, what was it, 4 or 5 changes to our ordinances this evening.
Sure thing.
Next on the agenda is item number 12, discussion and possible award of the 2021 pavement markings bid.
Did anyone else just hear that?
Yeah. Casey, have you got, could you
Sounds
mute
like a
some?
disco.
Wow, that was weird. Yeah, hold on a second. Let me see who's open. Doug White just left during that weird
situation.
it might have just been a glitch with GoToMeeting, but everybody else is muted except the board. So.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah.
Dave, over to you.
This is just the annual line painting bid. This year we had Westchester Borough actually joined with us. So it's Westtown, West Goshen, East Goshen, Euclid, and Westchester. So that's why you see the big number. It's not all us.
So question, Dave, I see 3 numbers in here. Just want to be clear. So the 197,978 is the total cost for all the townships work, that was the scope of all the work. The
Yes.
39,999.20 is the specific share for West Goshen.
That's the amount that we bid every year, Sean, but depends on what we're paving. When we pave, we put thermoplastic lines down. So we try to get 3 to 5 years out of that. So it moves around. Some years we line paint in some of the parking lots. Sometimes we do the admin building parking lots. We generally bounce between like 47,000 and 65,000 a year with line painting, depending on how much they actually do.
So the other number that's shown on the memo, Dave, is the 78,781. So is that number the one you're expecting to pay this year, or is it the 39?
No,
I was confused.
We typically are right around 60,000, depending on the actual quantities.
So then what does that 78,000 mean where it says bid? Is that coming from this Alpha Space Control?
I don't know what you're looking at.
I think that's a typo. I apologize for that.
Okay.
Yeah, the
ignore
task
that.
is recommending that we award in the amount of that 197,000, and West Goshen's share would be 39.99. But then there's.
Yeah, I said, John, just ignore the 78,000. I'm not sure. I must have made a mistake when I was trying to get that up.
Right.
So tonight, Casey, we're going to approve what, the 39,999.20, or
you're going to approve the 197,978.75 for the overall bid. And like Dave said, we fluctuate between $60,000 and $70,000 for our portion.
So what did we budget this year?
Mark usually budgets, I don't have it right in front of me, but he generally budgets right around 60,000 for line painting.
Right.
Okay.
Dave, why is this the way it's been for several years with just one bidder responding? Is this kind of a monopoly now in this area?
We've tried the last few years, we've tried some of the other contractors. It's very difficult. Nobody wants to do, there's not a huge profit margin in this. For every foot of a double yellow line, they get 6 cents. The truck to do it cost $1 million. So, you know, these companies that are out there, there's two big ones that do a lot of turnpike work and all that. They're going after rate jobs and that kind of stuff. We're not paying prevailing wage because it's a maintenance operation.
Right.
For the companies that do it, when we do line painting, that's getting prevailing wage. That's what these companies are going after. They don't really want to do these annual line painting contracts.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the board?
Explain why they're not paying prevailing wage. You're saying this because this is a maintenance project and it's not a capital improvement project?
Right. It's
Correct.
maintenance, it's not construction.
Correct.
Yeah, the Prevailing Wage Act defines what is, you know, what types of projects, and maintenance is specifically excluded, and this absolutely is maintenance.
I'm still a little bit unclear about the amount that we're being asked to approve here. We're being asked to approve for the full amount, but that includes 3 other municipalities. Are we on the hook for the full amount of $197,000 if we approve this tonight?
No, each individual municipality gets invoiced separately.
Correct. We're just running the bid for everybody, that's all.
Westtown actually does the bid for us for road salt.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing. They run the bid, they advertise it for the road salt. East Goshen, us, and Westtown are all in on that joint venture.
So we're authorized to approve this bid on behalf of the other townships because they've designated us as the township that's run the bid process?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Kristen, that's okay? There's no legal issue there?
No, we looked into that. It's intergovernmental cooperation. That's fine. And representing the borough, I know I had a conversation with the borough about it, and there's economies of scale in running one bid rather than every municipality having to do it.
Yep.
Sure. How is it determined who pays what?
It's all on quantities to each individual municipality.
Mm-hmm.
And how is that quantified? How is that measured? How is it documented?
Contractor comes in, contractor does the work. We have our sign foreman typically keeps an eye on them. Mm-hmm. And goes out and checks to make sure they do what they did and the right quantities and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have some internal township quality control happening here, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Are there any other questions at this point from the board?
No, not for me.
Can we have a motion then to approve whoever it was,
I'll make
Alpha?
that motion. I'll make the motion to approve it.
The motion is to approve in the amount of $197,978.75.
Correct.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any final board comments or questions? Any comments or questions from the public?
Hi, it's Margie.
Go ahead, Margie.
Hi, I appreciate all your questions because I had many of the same ones. So just one last clarification, and I don't have the paperwork in front of me. So what was the basis and what was the $39,000 for?
$39,000 is it's the base bid that we put in every year on our quantities. None of the townships really change their quantities from year to year, but the scale of work gets changed from year to year depending on conditions over the winter. Things change. Every year we throw one parking lot in, typically either a parks parking lot or the admin building parking lot. So the actual quantities move around a little bit, but the bid really doesn't change.
Okay.
So Margie, the 39,000 is a list of typical or expected markings to be made. It consists of a bunch of things like single white line, double yellow line, arrows, stop bars, lots of things. It's an estimate that's typical of what we expect to do. And then as Dave says, in addition to that, we may need a review of the parking lots or whatever at the township properties may say this really needs doing, and that's added to the scope. But we have the fee schedule based on the cost per these units.
Correct. But I just thought I heard that typically they budget about $60,000 every year, and that's essentially about what we spend every year. So why wasn't that $60,000?
Because our quantities stay the same. That's what we bid is the minimum work that we're going to do. In the last 4 years, 1 year we actually did do $47,000 worth of work. So it depends on the winters we have. Every year when we pave, we use thermoplastic, which we try to get 3 to 5 years out of. So a road that we paved last year, we may not necessarily paint this year, but this past winter was pretty bad. So the one problem with the thermo is when we plow a lot, you'll actually damage it with the snow plows. So we try to get 3 to 5 years out of it, but we may not get it. And I think this year we have to do some painting that we weren't expecting to do because of that.
Okay, thank you very much.
I just have a general question, just very brief. When we do these intergovernmental contracts where we all kind of go in and pull together, do they typically give any sort of like break on the cost, or does it really not matter?
We looked at that this year, and there was really no change in the price for us. For the quantities that we're using, there's really no change in price other than the long lines went up. It went from 0.062 cents per foot to 0.064. So 2/100ths of a cent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of the cost savings is well, I mean, that we can quantify on a given basis. 4 or 5 municipalities don't have to advertise this 4 or 5 times. I mean, that's hundreds of dollars per municipality. So that's right off the top.
Okay.
Are there any final comments or questions from the board or the public? Okay, we have a motion and a second, a roll call vote. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
You?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Sean? Aye. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay, agenda item number 13, reports for the month of March 2021. Police report presented by Chief Michael Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the month of March 2021, the police department responded to 2,196 calls for service. 52 of those calls were alarms, and 6 of those 52 alarms were found to be valid. We responded to 16 reportable accidents and 31 non-reportable accidents, and our officers drove a total of 17,472 miles. Some of the specific areas we conducted traffic enforcement this month were Rosary Lane, Jones Lane, Longford Road, South High Street, Spruce Avenue, Falcon Lane, Grove Road, Taylor's Mill Road, and Ashbridge Road. In the area of career development, our officers conducted their normal monthly Lexipol daily training bulletins. Their normal Act 180s were done, and the emergency response team had their normal monthly training. In addition to that, Sergeant Sedlak attended an advanced search and seizure class. Detective Taylor re-upped her MPS training now that she's performing a different role. Two of our new officers, Officer Burnt and Officer Needham, conducted narcotics field test training. Detective Edwards and Officer Riley became certified CTS instructors, which is a less lethal instructor training. And Officer Grandizio attended DRE instructor training. And that's the report from the police department, but I'll certainly answer any questions that you might have.
Chief, what's DRE? I'm sorry.
That's a drug recognition expert. That's very specified training that Officer Sergeant Grandizio has. He's one of the few officers in the state that have it.
Are there any board questions for the chief?
I have one question, Chief Carroll. On the monthly alarm activities list there's several there that aren't identified as to their landmark, and that's unusual. I don't ever recall any of your monthly reports not having them identified. Can you shed any light on that?
I believe there are going to be alarms that didn't have a permit prior to the alarm. So the way the report is generated, the landmark only goes in residences that have an alarm. So if they hadn't gotten their permit yet, they wouldn't have that landmark generated. So when the report came out, there wouldn't be any in that block.
So these are alarms that are giving false alarms and they're not even permitted yet. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what do you have to do in order to get a permit, in order to get yourself a identification? You have to apply to the police department?
You apply to the township.
So what happens if we have an alarm system in operation that's not permitted?
I believe you get a fine.
Yeah, that's all covered in chapter 25.
Okay. So these folks who have had false alarms here are being, not only did they have a false alarm, but also they're being fined because they're not properly permitted. Correct?
Yeah, there's a couple reasons for the alarms that you get fined, and there are many fines that go out, and my understanding is most of them are already paid.
Okay.
Any other questions for the chief? Chief, I did see.
No, actually, you want to talk about the meeting we had earlier today?
Sure, I was gonna talk about that during board announcements, but I can talk about it if you'd rather. So John and I did meet with Chief Carroll before this meeting started. We talked about a few things. We talked about the body cams again, kind of how that's going. According to the chief, and you can speak to this yourself, Chief, it's going great. They're all rolled out. Officers are doing really well with them. Do you want to comment on that?
Sure. Yes, the rollout has been completed for a couple months now. They've received very well. We are having less and less issues as time goes on, and most of those issues had to do with the learning curve or getting the systems to properly work together with our MVRs. But everything's positive.
And the other thing that we do want to announce too is that on May 6th, the chief put together a meeting of local leaders that's probably going to act as sort of a precursor to discussing some kind of citizens advisory board that John and I have been researching and looking into, and the chief have been looking into over the past several months. So that's happening May 6th. John and I will be attending that with the chief. And we hope to take some notes and kind of fill the rest of the board in on how that goes. John, do you want to make any comments about that, or Chief Carroll?
Yeah, it's a meeting we're going to have with some of the key players in the community, just to let them know where the department stands with some of the changes we intended to make in the new year, get their feedback on what they think, how the changes are going, and get their feedback on where they think the department should head in the future. And it seems like a good meeting to kind of lay the groundwork for a citizens advisory board and how it would work.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, a lot of the folks being invited to attend this are people of color and people from all faiths. And I think it would be a great interaction between all of our community and the police department here. And I want to commend Chief Carroll for taking the initiative here in pursuing this. I think this is a great effort, along with another effort which the police department has initiated, and that is the traffic committee. I attended that just on April 13th, and I think that's a great effort. Also on the part of our police department here. And I just want to ask Chief Carroll, can you expand on that a little bit? Talk about what the purpose is of the traffic committee, what follow-up there will be with that, and when the next meetings for the traffic committee will be.
Sure. So the purpose is an effort to get in more contact with the community, be a little more transparent as to how the traffic unit works. Something that's generally, I think, unexpected by the community is the amount of feedback and complaints we get about traffic in the neighborhoods. That's one of the chief complaints we hear from our citizens, and we want to make sure we attend to those complaints as openly as we can. So we invited citizens to come to this meeting, meet with the traffic unit. They could bring their complaints to the meeting, and they get feedback directly on how the complaints are dealt with, what the traffic unit and the township can and can't do about the situations, and they can come up with a collaborative effort to move forward for different complaints. Anything that has to be followed up on after the meeting, the traffic unit follows up with the citizens after as to what they can and can't do. And the next meeting is set. I don't have the date in front of me. I believe it's in July.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's every quarter. Yeah. Anyway, great job. I think that's a great effort, and looking forward to that continuing on in the future. The only other thing I just wanted to mention, Ashley, if I could, the other things we discussed was besides the body cameras, we talked about the data acquisition and collection and the posting of that information, particularly all contacts made between our police department and the officers with the citizens as far as the racial and ethnicity of those individuals, just to keep an eye on and to serve as a monitoring of the activities of our police department. And I think that's an important part of what data collection should mean for us. Chief, are you going to be posting that on the police website for all citizens to be able to be aware of?
I think we could certainly do that. We're still perfecting the collection. I would want to make sure we got it a little more accurate and pushing and pulling out which data it belongs there and doesn't. But I think once we have it down to a reasonable certainty that we're accurate, I see no reason not to post that information.
Well, I think that would be a good community service. And then the final thing we talked about, and we went into the great detail about this, and that was the kind of training that our police department and the township provides for all of our sworn uniform officers, and that consists of many different kinds of training. Can you talk about that a little bit, Chief?
Sure. There's a lot of mandatory training the state requires of municipal police officers in the state. The number of hours in a year that they have to do, each officer has to do mandatory is probably up around 20 hours. And then on top of that, we perform a lot of training here. The minimum certainly isn't enough for us. We have to make sure that when we're out serving the community in West Goshen, we're doing the best job possible. And that can't happen without ongoing training.
And I was particularly interested in discussing firearms training and also anti-bias training as well, which is provided by the department. And I think that'd be a topic of conversation at this May 6th gathering as well, I think. Well, anyway, I think we had a good discussion earlier today. Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Chief.
You're welcome.
Chief, I just want to mention that I did see the news article about the good work that was done between West Goshen and the Chester County detectives, and in particular recognize West Goshen Detective Jose Torres for his work in dealing with the situation of alleged child abuse. So thank you to him.
I'll pass it on.
Just one last item. Has that TV show been presented yet about the Bianca Roberson situation and how video was utilized in order to bring that case to conclusion?
It has not. I heard from them last week. They were still working on finalizing the project.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Are there any questions for the chief from the public? Thanks very much, Chief Carroll. We appreciate your time tonight.
Welcome.
Agenda item number 14, Board of Supervisor announcements. Ashley?
Yes, I have a couple announcements tonight. So just a reminder that the Sustainability Advisory Committee is going to be celebrating Arbor Day on this Friday, the 23rd, at 5:00 p.m. You can set your GPS to 908 Old Fern Hill Road, the site of a 300-year-old beach. We have obviously the Sustainability Committee attending. It's going to be outside. It's going to be masked. We have Andrew's Landscaping that's going to be donating trees, as well as Bill Webb, who came through for us and will be donating some trees as well. So thanks, Bill. And yeah, you can come and get a bag the reusable grocery bags that the sustainability committee designed and ordered have come in. Casey, I think that they're actually giving them out at the administration building right now. Is that correct?
Yes, they are, one per household.
Okay, great. So people can go and pick up one of those. Let's see, what else? John, did you want to comment on our meeting today with, John and I went out this morning and met with Michael Dunn, who's the arborist for Westchester Borough. And we went with him and a couple of folks from the Chester Ridley Crum Watershed Association to tour the portion of the Goose Creek that runs behind the Kmart back there. Because they have some interest in working with West Goshen and the borough to sort of remediate that area in the future. And so we went out there and we took a walk along the creek. We looked at the stream banks, got a little bit of education about why it is the way it is and how that leads to flooding downstream, which we all know Montgomery Avenue gets a lot of flooding. It's a huge problem. So I know that this board is very concerned with stormwater issues, rightfully so, and our staff. And I think this is a good place to keep an eye on and maybe be open to working on in the future. And so I told them to reach out to us after our meeting. And if the board is interested, that we could get them on the agenda in the near future to make a short presentation about that section of creek. So I'd be interested in hearing what the board has to say about that.
Board have any comments back to Ashley? I certainly endorse doing that, Ashley. I think it's important that we look at all avenues and parties that are interested in trying to help us manage stormwater in a more proactive way than we've certainly done to date.
Yeah, now they were bringing together a lot of the principal parties there that could join together in pursuing grant opportunities and addressing that problem. And what I think they brought to the table is like a holistic approach, looking at a simplistic one-shot deal, but looking at restoring that area there to where it's more of a natural habitat, where it'll be better able to handle the dissipation of the stormwater instead of having it all end up flooding Montgomery Avenue like it seems to do whenever we get a storm. So definitely something worth pursuing.
Any other things to report, Ashley?
No, that's all. Thanks.
Thanks. John?
Besides that, I also, following from that, I attended on April the 16th the 2020 Chester County Municipal Stormwater Summit, in which they had a lot of the discussion like we had this morning, talking about what's needed to be done in order to remediate those areas that, due to human endeavors over the decades, have created problems which we now have to deal with as far as stormwater issues. So that was a very interesting and rather detailed summit. The only other thing I want to report on is that the Pennsylvania Society of Township Supervisors has been doing their annual conference online this year, as they did last year because of COVID. And I had the opportunity, as well as all the other board members, to sign up for the online sessions. And I took the opportunity to sign up for many of them. And as part of my graduate program that I'm pursuing with them, I hope that will, after I complete attending all those courses they have offering this year, I should be able to complete my graduate program with them. So I'm looking forward to doing that. So that's all I have, Sean.
That's
Thanks,
great, John.
Yeah, good for you. Hugh, anything to report?
Yes, I've been working on the car show, which will happen at the back end of Community Park over by Iceline on May 22nd. And also, like John, I've been working with the Township Supervisors Group. But basically, that's it.
Thanks, Hugh. Robin?
So in the last week or so, I had an opportunity to reconnect with the group of people that we had been talking to in the Roslyn area. Lisa, Luis, and her friend Jean have been steadfastly moving forward with trying to still continue to identify issues in that community. And Julie Dietrich, who is our sponsor and who basically provides us with the feedback in terms of the things that they bring to the table. We had a very productive conversation for about an hour. There was a lot of give and take about what was actually happening on the campus. I was able to give a little bit of information, but that was before we knew that Chancellor Fiorentino did not want us to talk about student housing. So we're going to continue to meet every other month. Lisa and Jean will set the tone in terms of what issues are there. There have been some issues apparently related to some aspects of sort of like an underground level of water that's going through one of the parts of the neighborhood. And they're very concerned about mosquitoes and other things being left in that little gully area. So, and Julie is a very responsive person for us. I mean, she knows as soon as we start talking, she already is writing down a list of all the things that she wants to now be able to bring to Mr. Vitella as well as to the Chancellor. So I'm glad that we re-engaged. We didn't really do much during the pandemic time period, and we're working forward to keep moving forward to make sure that that community is getting what it needs from both the township as well as the university.
Thanks, Robin. I have just a couple of announcements. One is the board met in executive session on April the 15th to discuss personnel matters. Like John, I also was a participant in the Chester County Municipal Stormwater Summit. It was good to be refreshed about all the issues that we have and the solutions that are potentially out there. And Rick, there was one presenter who certainly seemed to think that floodplain restoration was cost competitive with basin retrofits. So he presented a couple of slides that showed how in certain circumstances, not every time, but that it's as good a solution for creating improvement in water quality as the basin. So at some point we'll have to have some conversations around whether there's any opportunities for that in West Goshen and see where we can go with it. So that's it for the Board of Supervisor announcements. Casey, over to you for Township Manager.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Tonight I have three announcements. The first is that the township staff are finalizing the next 5-year waste and recycling contract. It's in final draft. We'll be getting that out to the board for individual review and comment in the next 2 weeks. And then we'll be submitting that to Kristen Camp for review as well to get that out to bid, effective date of January 1, 2022. Next item, today, Dave Woodward, Rick Craig, and I met with PennDOT out at the Boot Road overpass over Route 202. Just a advisory to our residents listening. One lane is closed on Boot Road going eastbound due to a, I'm going to put it as cordially as I can. The PennDOT made a mistake with their milling machine and milled away the concrete deck of the bridge, exposing the steel rebar, which is a no-no to say the least. So that will be closed. Rick gave an estimate of several months to do a good design and fix for that. So just watch for that. There's not a detour in place, but just watch if you're traveling in that area for congestion. And my last item is, and if Dave wants to chip in as well, our 2021 paving program is underway. They started Monday, and the contractor, Alan Myers, as usual, has brought in an army to get the work done, and they'll be done in probably about 3 weeks. This is our earliest bid ever, and we will be completed, I believe, in the earliest that I've ever seen it here in West Goshen. So those are my announcements.
Casey, do you have any? Go ahead, Hugh.
I'm sorry. Thanks. Casey, that's the bridge next to the water tower, right?
Correct. That is the Boot Road bridge over 202. Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Casey, do you have any comments about the meeting you had with the university chancellor and some of the feedback he provided about our overlay and suggested direction for us?
Certainly. I met with via Zoom with President Fiorentino and John Villela, his chief of staff. And President Fiorentino expressed a desire for West Goshen to eliminate all student housing from our Westchester University overlay ordinance. So that is obviously the board's discretion to do that. He is trying to mend fences with the borough, and he suggested that West Goshen Township remove again all references to student housing for our version of the ordinance.
So Casey, we can regroup around what that means at our upcoming workshop in May, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll have it on the agenda then to see what the implication of that is and what the board wants to do.
Yeah, we can. I'll work with Kristen and staff on doing a red line copy of the ordinance, eliminating those provisions from the ordinance as well.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Casey?
Yeah, I have a question, just a comment. I think with that happening with the PUC overlay, I think we should be able to move forward with that, but that's my own thinking on it. Casey, if I can ask, what is the status of the $2.2 million that we're looking to get from the federal government as a result of the American Recovery Act? What is the status of that and where are we at?
Well, we're waiting for the Treasury Department to write the rules on how it's supposed to be dispersed. We have not seen anything new. I think they're doing the rulemaking right now. I know Chrissy Houlihan, our federal representative, I've submitted comments to her, and I know many of my colleagues around the county have done so as well, with some requests as to what the money could be used for. So again, the Federal Treasury Department is writing up the rules as we speak, but we have no timetable right now.
Okay. Do you have any inclination? Your ear might be closer to the rail than the rest of us as to what limitations there may be put upon these monies available from the feds?
Well, the original act already said generally what it could be used for. It can be used for any COVID mitigation measures. It can be used for infrastructure, for water, sewer, etc. You can use it for pay for employees. But again, the final rules have to be promulgated by the federal government, so we're waiting for those.
I thought there was like a 50% would be received within 60 days of the signing or something like that.
That's what the act says, but we're there, and we have no indication that we're getting any money anytime soon.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you, Casey.
Thank you.
Item number 16, Township Engineers, Stormwater Announcements and Woodlands at Greystone Update. Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of project updates. We're in the last phase of the Ravens Lane pipe replacement project now. We're in the third block, so that's underway. We just signed the contracts for the Idlewild Basin retrofits that are being done under the ME2 grant. So we're going to be scheduling a pre-construction meeting with the contractor shortly to get that work underway. And just today we met to begin the design of a basin retrofit for the Pine Valley Circle pipe replacement project as well. That'll become part of that project for when that work is done. As far as Greystone, housing construction continues unabated, and infrastructure work is starting up again, and paving operations are resuming on some of the interior streets. And that's all I have for tonight, unless you have some questions.
Thanks, Rick. Any questions for Rick?
Yeah, Rick, let me ask you, what's the status of the Ravens Lane project regarding the extras?
I have no update on the status of the extras. There has been no further problems with the project that should result in extras, other than we're having an issue with a water main that we have to go under. but we think we've figured out a way to do that without any significant increase in cost. So it's just the pipe rerouting and flowable fill that we had already discussed before. And we do not yet have final costs on those.
Yeah, and the rock removal too, I believe.
Yeah.
Isn't there also an issue? Isn't there also an issue with the Verizon, also some fiber optic line there that's kind of holding things up right now?
Yes. Actually, I misspoke. It was not a water main. It's the Verizon that we're working on resolving now. But we talked with the engineer today, and we think we have a solution. We were trying to work with Verizon to get that relocated, but it's going to take too long to do it. It's going to hold up the project. So we're going to do a workaround to get underneath of that.
Wow. Really? Because that was going like almost right directly through the center of that HDPE piping that was going to be placed into that drain. You're going to be able to get under.
I think we're going to be able to get under it. We're going to use a slightly smaller pipe diameter to get under it, but we should still be able to maintain the flow rate that we need since the pipe has a lower coefficient of friction than the existing pipe. So at this point, we think we have a way to handle it. That could change, but so far so good. Do you have anything to add to that, Dave?
Yeah, just that our design engineer, Chris from Carroll, was looking at downsizing the pipe to 30-inch HDPE. That should allow us, we may have to reset that box that's in there a little bit to gain some room, and going to a downsized pipe will help us flip underneath it, we hope.
Right.
Is that going to incur any extra charge because they have to change the size of the piping?
We may get some pipe, but we use that's 36-inch pipe that we use at a routine basis. So we'll get that pipe, and if we have some work to do up off North New Street that we can use it at.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Any other questions for Rick?
May I ask a question, John, please?
Go ahead, Margie.
Rick, you mentioned the Pine Valley Circle project and a basin related to that. Is that basin a public or private basin? And what's being done to that basin?
The basin is owned by the township.
Okay. And then if you don't mind me just going back to a request, the funds that we're expected to receive from the federal government, could we discuss where those are at least going to be deposited? It would be my suggestion that those funds are deposited into the capital reserve account and not the general fund.
That was going to be our recommendation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Margie. Any other questions for Rick?
Any idea when the Pine Valley job will be starting, Rick? Any idea? Even estimated?
No, that's still under design. I would estimate that we probably got another 2 months, give or take, of design. So yeah, that's start date for that's not on the radar yet until the design's completed.
Yeah, and then we'll have another bidding process as well for that.
Right.
Are there easements that have to be gotten from the residents along Pine Valley? Because it's going right in front of their houses and across their driveways and everything. Does the township have the easement already for that?
I don't.
As far as we know, we have the easements, but we're double checking.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are pre-existing drainage easements, but we are double checking to ensure those are still in effect.
Yeah.
And you're right. It does go through quite a few front yards, and we did look at the possibility of rerouting that pipe into the street.
We did.
And it was not feasible because of a number of utility conflicts. So we do need to keep it where it is, and it's going to create some disturbance.
Yeah. Any chance at all of lining that pipe rather than digging it up and removing it?
No, the pipe is shot. It's totally destroyed, and there's no possibility. Well, let me rephrase that. Some of the pipe is going to be relined.
Right. I think the smaller pipe.
The portion that is able to be relined is under the street.
Right.
Yeah.
So the pipe that needs to be replaced is in the front yards and a few other areas.
Yep.
We are lining wherever possible, but that pipe in the front yards is very, very deteriorated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's going to be an interesting project. I can tell you that right now.
Oh, they're all interesting.
Well, this one particularly.
Okay, any other questions for Rick? A lot of interest in stormwater projects. Okay, moving on. Item number 17, zoning officers announcements. Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The zoning hearing board is set to meet next Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. By Zoom. They're going to render decisions for 1135 Pottstown Pike, which was the antique store, and 325 North Five Points Road, which was the de minimis relief in the front yard setback for a front porch. New applications that are going to be heard before the board are application 12 of 2021 for Citizens Bank at 22 Turner Avenue, or excuse me, Turner Lane. Currently, the Citizens Bank is under renovation. They currently have 7 signs on location. They want to add 9 in total, so they're coming back to the zoning hearing board for relief for 2 additional signs. The additional signs that they're seeking relief are wall signs, and you would not even notice them from the street. They are right to the left of the entryway to the Citizens Bank. So I would recommend on that application that the township does not take a position, but again, that is your decision as to whether the board would like to take a position on that application.
Any questions for Bill about that application? Does anybody have feelings about whether the board should have a position or not?
No, I think that, yeah, I think that we should take Bill's advice. I don't really think we need to take a position. It's my feeling.
Bill, not hearing any questions for you, and no position from the board.
Sounds good. Then the zoning hearing board will also hear application 13 of 2021, 2021, which is Road 10 LLC at 981 North New Street. This applicant previously had received a variance and special exception in 2018. However, they never filed their land development application and subdivision application, and she thought that her variance was still good. And when she called to talk about filing, I said, well, your variance has expired, and it expired a while ago. So she has refiled. She is asking for the same relief. So she is asking for a variance from section 84-10A parens 2, which is the minimum lot width in the R2 zoning district. Currently, the property has 147.56 feet of lot width. The zoning ordinance requires 150 feet. So this is de minimis in nature. The second is the second piece of relief they're seeking is a special exception from section 84-90.9F parens 1, which is to permit the construction of a driveway in the floodplain related to the construction of a residential dwelling. Again, the township has never taken a position on an application of such de minimis relief, and we've never taken an application on any utilities or driveways crossing through a floodplain. And again, we did not take a position in 2018. So my suggestion would be that we do not take a position on their newest application. But again, that is a board decision.
Thanks, Bill. Any questions for Bill or any view of the board about taking a position on this application?
I don't think we should I don't think we should be involved. Let the zoning hearing board take care of it.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. Any other comments? No position, Bill. It's all yours to take to the zoning hearing board.
Very good. So just one final piece. We recently, Casey and I met with the developer and the developer's attorney for the Spellman property. They presented what they're going to file for their land development application to us. They kind of brought us up to speed. And through that meeting, we had recommended to them, it was probably in their best interest to have a neighborhood meeting. As the township is in the redevelopment phase of life, I think we're going to have more projects that we have non-conforming uses butting up against conforming uses where we may need to have more of these things. So we'd recommended in a neighborhood meeting. The developer took us up on that. So tomorrow night, Rick and I will be attending a meeting with the neighbors along with the developer. Rick and I will be simply there for observation purposes. But that's tomorrow night at 7 p.m. and that's with those neighbors over on Fir Avenue. That concludes what I. Thank you.
Bill, where's that meeting being held?
That's by Zoom. The developer set up a Zoom link.
Okay. Any questions for Bill?
No, thanks, Bill.
Bill, that Spellman property redevelopment, is it still involved the same concept as had previously been presented to the board with respect to an Aldi supermarket, a bank, and a restaurant, I think it was?
Yes. It may not be a bank, it may be 2 restaurants.
Okay. And that property also extends into the back there where the creek is that flows that we were talking about earlier. So
yeah, we got questions about that today.
Yeah, an opportunity for improvement to stormwater, considerable improvements I would expect from the redevelopment of that parcel. Okay, thanks, Bill. Next agenda item is number 18, approval of the Board of Supervisors meeting minutes of March the 16th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
I'm going to,
approval?
yes, I'd like to make a motion because I'm almost certain that it's going to be time for Derek to move on from the minutes. And I wanted to go ahead and make the motion so we can accept them today. And I actually read through most of them. I read through most of them just to make sure it was accurate.
Okay, so we have a motion from Robin, and Hugh, you seconded, I heard, yes?
Correct. That's correct. And yes, I read through.
Are there any corrections, omissions, or edits that the board believes are required to the minutes?
Not a nice job, Derek.
Is there any public comment or questions about the minutes? Hearing none, ready to take a vote on approval of the minutes for March the 16th. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
You?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Sean? Aye. Agenda
Thanks,
item
Derek.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Good job, Derek.
Welcome.
Agenda item number 19, approval of the Treasurer's Report dated March the 31st, 2021 for the General Fund, the Sewer Revenue Fund, the Waste and Recycling Fund, and the Capital Reserve Fund, and the bills to be paid from these funds. Do I have a motion for approval?
I'd like to make the motion that we approve paying the bills.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you. Are there any board questions or comments about the bills to be paid or the Treasurer's Report on the funds?
I'd like to ask, you may not be able to answer the question now, or maybe I could put this question to Casey or Derek, the earned income tax. How does that compare to last year and 2019? I'm just curious to see how we're doing as we proceed down this road to dealing with COVID with our income revenue, particularly with the earned income tax. So I suppose I'm putting in that request. Can we get a comparison?
John, there is one. If you have, do you have the report in front of you, John? The Treasurer's Report. If you go to the bottom of page 5, those two key revenue streams are listed there in terms of year-on-year comparison.
Okay.
Yep, right at the bottom.
Gotcha. Very good. All right. Thank you. You answered my question. Okay.
Yeah, we saw a nice spike in earned income for this, the first quarter, over 20 and 19. So we're in very good shape so far.
Okay.
And real estate transfer tax also through the roof because of the woodlands.
Yeah. Casey, just one question on the bills to be paid. I noticed this month we made our contribution to Good Fellowship Ambulance and also the Westchester Library System.
Correct.
The contributions to the other fire companies, when are those made?
We typically try to spread those out. We don't do all four at once. So I believe in May we'll do the fire company. We split our fire company. I believe we do it in two checks to Westchester Fire. It's not a lump sum, but I'll double check that. And I think we wait for an invoice from Goshen Fire Company and East Goshen Township for their contribution.
Okay, thanks. Hugh, do you know if Goshen is doing their fair this year for their fundraiser?
I do not know that yet. I haven't heard specifically. I kind of doubt it, but I don't know yet.
Yeah, that draws a lot of people. I really doubt they're going to be able to do it.
What if it's possible to push it back and do it anyway?
Yeah.
So we've had a motion and a second. Any other board comments? Are there any
reference the fair, Sean? There's an awful lot of stuff that has to be set up, but the major thing is getting the fairway, the midway people set up, and getting that contract scheduled is the toughest part.
Yeah. Thanks, Hugh. Are there any other board comments on the bills or the funds? Are there any public comments on the bills to be paid or the funds?
Hi, it's Margie. I have a couple questions.
Go ahead, Margie.
Hi, I just noticed a approximate $90,000 revenue for special police services. Just curious as to what that revenue stream was for.
I don't know, but I may be able to assist with it. I think we received payment from the school district in March, so that may be it.
Yeah, I believe that's the resource officer payment.
Okay, and then I did see about $100,000 jump in the March 18th payroll. I take it that was from Captain Stone's accrual and then possibly somebody else's. Did somebody else retire as well? The increase might have been overtime.
Yeah, it was just general overtime and Stone's payout.
And I'm glad Sean brought up those key revenues on page 5. Would it be possible for Christine to add the real estate tax as a third item for that category so we can compare real estate revenue month to month?
Casey, you're on mute there.
Probably 90% of the money's collected by the discount period, so we can add that. It's not going to give you much data because, again, most of the money's front loaded to the front of the year. So
yeah, I just know, those are our three main revenue streams, and I just think it does. I mean, I always find that very helpful information. So it would just be nice to have the real estate tax because we actually, that figure is higher than the realty transfer tax. So I just think it would be nice to have that added. So I appreciate that. And I'm going to bring up fire hydrants again. So as you see, we pay for 505 hydrants rental fees every month for a tune of right at $13,000. Roughly 15 so-called private hydrants at $25 a month If the township took those on, you're looking at an additional $375 per month. But by the township not allowing Aqua to charge the township, it actually costs those private homeowners twice as much, $750 a month, because Aqua pays the residents on those roads twice as much as they charge the township. So if you're not going to work with us on these piddly little 15 hydrants versus the 505, I'm asking that the township have all the hydrants billed to them, and then you simply send a bill to those homeowners associations or residents and let us pay the township, because that would save us, you know, we're a small homeowners association, there's 12 of us. So you know, obviously I have my issues with that. Every single hydrant in the township is owned by Aqua. They're all maintained by Aqua. We are hooked up to a public water source, which makes them a public hydrant. So I ask again that you reconsider that. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Margie. Any other questions on the bills to be paid? Okay, hearing none, ready to take a roll call vote. Ashley?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
You?
Aye.
Robin?
Aye.
Sean is aye. So the final agenda item tonight is public comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to make a comment or raise an issue that has not been discussed this evening?
Sean, this is Doug. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Okay, I'd like to make a few comments. Bill Webb had made a good point about a meeting with the community about that land development. That's very important. And I know this, it's a long time coming, but when they built the fucking court apartments over on Falcon Lane, that never happened. It sprung us. It was a big surprise when that went up. And also when they cut Falcon Lane through all the way through to West Town Road. So that, Bill Webb, I would like to thank you for making that comment. Also, I appreciate Margie's comments on the new monies coming in from the federal government. My suggestion would be to set up a separate fund for those monies, just so that's not commingled with our present budget, since it's an unusual situation. Just a suggestion. And also, I'd like to thank Officer Hero with our police department for his service and help for us, and Sergeant Grandizio also for the traffic safety meeting. And also, I would urge the township to not open the gate at Eagle Road that separates Falcon Crest and East Goshen Township. That gate's been there since 1985. I urge the township to not open that, or at least think greatly about it before doing that, because it would really mess up the traffic in Falcon Crest. Thank you.
Doug, why did that last issue you raised? Is there something happening there that's changed? I'm just trying to understand why you brought it up.
Well, when in 1985, when the Goshen Valley was expanded, there was the cut through on Sylvan Road, which was controversial, and that happened. And then the gate was put up at the bottom of Eagle Road. It was originally a dead end. One of the residents on who lives on Boulder Lane in Falcon Crest was at the Traffic Safety Committee meeting, and he expressed concerns in opening that gate to general traffic to make it easier for people who live in Goshen Valley to cut through Falcon Crest. I have a personal interest in Falcon Crest. I grew up there. So I'd like to see that those residents not be inundated with traffic. and I think Sergeant Grandizio, Sergeant Greiser, I'm sorry, Sergeant Greiser made the comment that that expansion of East Goshen was made under the understanding that there'd be a gate there, and it would just be for fire access. So it came from a resident who wanted it opened on Boulder Lane, but I would respectfully disagree. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. So just a general question. In terms of ideas from residents related to traffic safety that come, that are raised or put forward at the new traffic safety committee or traffic committee, how are those managed? What's the process for evaluation and implementation?
Well, it was a very good process. People vented their grievances on what's going on South Five Points Road, Warren Road, and they're very valid concerns. People just speeding. And sometimes it's a road issue, and sometimes it's just a behavior problem of drivers.
Yeah.
So just like over here on 5 Points out in front of the office, it's 25 miles an hour. I do 25, not 26. I do 25. I mean, a car might drift up there, but the point is, when drivers behave themselves and show respect to others, it makes the quality of life for the rest of us that much better. I mean, everybody has the right to get where they're going. I get that. But when we're on these public roads, we should all respect each other and hold safety as the highest priority, and we'll all be better off.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Chief or Casey, what are your thoughts about specific suggestions versus the general complaints that you're hearing?
I think the general complaints they're handling within the meeting. If there was a suggestion that was any more than an inquiry, I'm sure the traffic unit would have referred them to the township, and I don't think it went beyond that.
Yeah, I've not had any official request to look or change anything based on that meeting.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Doug. Any other public comments or questions?
Hi, it's Margie.
Go ahead, Margie.
I did have the same thought as Doug recommended originally, but I thought sometimes I feel like I asked for too much. So I kept it simple with my request that the federal funds go into the capital reserve. But I do too agree with Doug that I personally believe that that should go into an entirely separate fund. And that way, when residents a year or two from now ask the township for specifics, how and where that money was spent, it would precisely show right out of that account. So I had that. And then also, Casey sent me a list. I was very interested in exactly what the drop portion of the latest police contract was going to cost us after the first 5 officers retired. Was the board copied in, or did the board receive those same figures that Casey was kind enough to share with me?
No, he did not send that to us yet, Margie.
Okay. Can I send that to you tomorrow or within the next couple of days and just make some comments I have about it?
You're welcome to share with the board your comments, and if you have something that it needs to be referenced, like the information you've been sent, you should include it too.
Okay, thank you very much.
I just want to follow up quickly, Margie, about the money. I have no problem doing what they're suggesting and opening another account. I just want to make sure that when that money does come in, that is a board decision and that we meet to talk about where that money's going to go.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I actually do agree a separate account, Casey, sounds the right approach, because it is a specific grant that we're being issued, and we do need to have the transparency around how we're going to spend it. Mm-hmm. So just like we made the transfer to the sewer fund for that specific interceptor improvement project, mm-hmm. we are tracking the expenses specifically against that request to show how the money is being spent on that interceptor rehabilitation work. So right. It does seem to make sense to me, but first let's get the check from the government.
Yeah, yeah.
We need to get the money first, that's for sure.
Are there any other public comments tonight?
Sean, are we going to talk about the boathouse down at the lake?
That was postponed tonight, Doug. It's going to be on the May 4th workshop agenda.
Okay. By the way, they are working on the dam down there. I saw the equipment, so that's starting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
If there aren't any other questions from the public tonight or comments, then do we have a motion to adjourn?
I will make that motion.
Good
Thank
idea.
you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Well, we don't need a roll call vote for this. I think if we're all in favor, please say aye.
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 All right.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone.
Very good. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good
Good night.
night. Good night. Thank you, Derek.